Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for joining the first session with the Radical Influence Network. First webinar, and the topic is value management for influence functions and going beyond measurement to management. We're going to have some Q&A at the end of this session, and let's just get right into it. Why is my slide not advancing? So just as a brief introduction, my name is Rick Ferraro. I come from a background of management consulting, particularly for corporate staff functions. And most of the functions that would fall under what I call influence functions would qualify here for government affairs, public affairs, external affairs, corporate social responsibility, sustainability, communications, legal, which does a fair amount of advocacy work, and so on and so forth. So I come to this not as a practitioner, but as an observer from a management perspective. And I've led engagements for in all kinds of industries, for all kinds of organizations, governments and corporations, associations, and the like. But with respect to this area, I've written works and delivered presentations in the last few years for the Public Affairs Council, the State Government Affairs Council, the Issue Management Council, and also developed some tools to help support that activity. My background is a trained engineer with an MBA focusing on management. So the topics here relate to introducing just really briefly a short commercial for the Radical Influence Network because we are brand new. And then I'd like to just touch on the roles of what I call chief external officers. They're CEOs of a different type. And then we'll get into a management model, and then we'll apply that to value, and then it'll all come together. So that's kind of and then we'll have a stopway point about midway there for any interim questions about the management framework element. So the benefits of the network of the Radical Influence Network was created to create a forum for professionals to really understand and identify ways to innovate to get significant performance improvements with their influence and advocacy work. So it's kind of an improvement effort, and it is really meant to be for the membership. So you're really going to do a lot of learning from your peers, and that is the intent here. This is not something that is following the political drama. This is apolitical inside these four walls. And this is about how to manage this function for greater value. So it's a professional network to exchange ideas. We have some structure around that with 6 pillars, which we'll talk about on the next slide. On our website, we have a very innovative media feed using a Media Watch service from Contexture Artificial Intelligence. That covers the 6 pillars that we've established here. They also offer a Bill Watch service, but what's unique about this is that it's driven by artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language programming, and so forth. So we'll have a number of webinars yet to be announced, somewhere in the works, some podcasts, guest contributors, and a blog. So you can help by telling your colleagues about us and help us become a more beneficial forum for each other. Why is this page not advancing? So just a framework for competence and excellence. We have identified 6 pillars or areas that we think drive the ability to achieve excellent performance in these influence functions. Today, we're going to be focusing on value management over there on the right at 3 o'clock, but also all of the others at the bottom. And the value management is actually highly dependent on issue management, which we're going to talk about in a bit, which is directly across at 9 o'clock. And coming down, business partnership and alignment. Every corporate staff function must work, especially the ones that are working externally, also need to work with their internal stakeholders and to be really good strategic advisors to those business leaders internally. And that's what business partnership is all about. And then how to innovate and transform and improve is also covered in this discussion here today. The other two, situational awareness, but through artificial intelligence, it helps you kind of survive in the sea of information that's coming forth every day, and allows you to get better specificity in what you're seeing through artificial intelligence technology. And the upper right, cognitive science and psychology, is really to use science-based insights and apply them to your influence programs. So let's just talk a bit about the role of the chief, the 5 roles of the chief external officer. And at the top, you can be facing externally or internally, and you're going to have different roles based on where you're focused there for where you're facing. On the left is your focus as it's either strategic at the top or in the bottom row, very tactical and execution oriented. And then that breaks down into these 4 roles. So if you're in the upper left and facing externally and dealing with things at a strategic level, you need to be a good political interpreter and strategist for what is valuable to the company and what will play and what will not play in the public sphere. That is very strategic and very essential. And then to deliver the programs that you're going to have for any one of these functions, you need to be able to architect what that program looks like and then manage its execution at a tactical level, and that's the lower left role. Today's discussion is going to focus on the pink shaded boxes. Upper right is a business value steward. You're facing internally and you're thinking strategically about what is valuable to the business and relentlessly pursuing that value. And then to deliver on that value with your influence function inside the company, you need to be able to identify the resources and then allocate them appropriately so that they are delivering the most value for what you're spending time on. And that's how you drive value throughout through the year, let's say. And in order to deliver on that, the business partner role is much like the grease in the gears of having things work between the function and any one of the internal other functions or business units that need support. So we're going to be focusing on the right side of this as we go forward. So now let's just turn to the concept of what is management and what is management for the influence functions, right? And this is a 5-step model, very simplified, very generic, and deliberately meant to apply to any of the influence functions that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to just go through each briefly. At this level, it sounds really simple. You learn the needs of who you're trying to support, whether it's the corporation as a whole or whether it's a certain business unit or a certain function. You define the work. You go apply some resources. You measure the results and monitor that to make sure you're getting the most value as you start to deliver. And then at the end of the program, you say, how do we do? How do we improve? That's the general notion. And for some reason, my page down is not working. So if you focus on the first one, how do you learn the needs? Well, you focus on 3 things. One is the business plan. The other is what are the key external issues you're facing? And then you actually set specific objectives for external support, each of those three bullets. So understanding the business plan, asking about it, having a conversation about it, looking for changes or throughout the year, things could divert from that plan, and how to adjust, what are the needs of the business as it faces the realities of the market it's operating in or the operational issues it's facing, for example, supply chain issues with COVID. So what are the needs, and monitoring that on an ongoing basis, because those needs change based on changes in business conditions at each moment in time. So with that, you're now armed with how you can, in an external role, and also identifying at the bottom of the risks and opportunities that are specific to that area of the business. You're now armed to say, well, what do we need to go do about those issues or those business challenges? And you can now move to the next step on the next page here, which is related to defining the work. So you have to ask yourself, what is the desired outcome of this grassroots program or lobbying effort or, engagement program? And is this a project that has a life, a beginning, a middle, and end, or is it ongoing production? So supporting a PAC, for example, is an annual cycle, but it goes through a production of steps each year and kind of goes through that. So it has a lot of cyclicality to it. Other things are monitoring issues and monitoring the media and so forth. Those are more steady state activities. So, and then within that, how do you measure work? What are the units of work? They could be issues, they can be contexts. In other words, you have a program to develop so many contexts related to topic X to support this program related to that division, so on and so forth. And then once you understand what work needs to be done, have you planned out put it into 10 steps? Just chunk it out so that it becomes a manageable activity and you have very specific process steps. The next step is to apply those resources and, well, first find those resources that fit that work once the work is defined. And that may mean you need to go outside. It may mean you need to change skills or substitute skills, or seek those skills externally, or find them somewhere else in the corporation through a subject matter expert. You then apply those resources to the work you've defined and execute it against your work plan. And that effort may be supported by various tools. You could have research tools for monitoring the media or bills. You might have a customer relationship management system. You might have something to support stakeholder engagement, or even environmentally. Some companies, some brands are actually starting carbon calculator support for sustainability efforts, as an example. The next step would be to measure the results from all that effort, the work against those defined processes and defined areas of work, and apply resources and ask, is the work getting done? Is it appropriate level of quality? And are we producing value? And then adjust a variety of levers to make sure that you may have to substitute skills, you may have to add or subtract resources, you might change priorities. You might adjust scope and say, we're not going to focus on everything, we're going to focus on just this one part, so on and so forth, to begin to control the work activity to get the results. And then after you kind of finish the year or you finish the project, you should take a pause. And this is really a key lesson of the quality movement over the last 30 years. To say, how can we improve next time? Let's do an after action report. That's what the military calls it. And develop a plan for how we get better at it when we do it next time. And it's also a key opportunity to communicate the value that you provide by capturing that information in what I call an annual value report back to the business units or to corporate. So I'll just pause here if anyone has any questions about these elements. And if not, I can just move forward right into the how-to on value for influence functions. So let me just, let me do that. I'm seeing no one's raising their hand. So how does this relate to value? Sorry, my page down button is not working right. So measurement, if we're talking about value measurement, it really has two components. We're actually going to get into a third one on the next page. But the approaches to measurement can be either qualitative or quantitative. It's a spectrum, right? And the fact is that adults learn both ways. So use both techniques. Don't have it be only one or the other. That would be not appropriate, and they need to complement and reinforce one another. So having a qualitative story, having a good narrative, having good logic for cause and impact, as well as having some occasional numbers that demonstrate the relative size of certain things can go a long way to communicating value, particularly to top executives. And then there's two other elements of performance that are really to be distinguished here. We'll get back to this. This will all come together at the end. These are kind of foundational components and so forth. Is to measure effectiveness versus efficiency. And effectiveness means it gets it right. Efficiency means it didn't cost a lot. And sometimes these two play against each other. And that's a common, thread of debate, around conference tables about, well, which do you want? Do you want us to do it right, or do you want us to do it, at the best cost? And the very typical answer of senior executive is, I just want both. I just want the best balance you can bring, and I know these are in conflict. I'm not asking to be perfect at either, and we need the best balance we can possibly draw. Okay, so the effectiveness could be your win rate on issues. We won this issue, we lost this issue. It could be the value produced in terms of the way you address the P&L impact of various issues, the profit and loss impact of various issues. Or it could even be the satisfaction. You do a short survey of executives that they are satisfied or not with the support your function provides them. This could be done informally, could also, a whole range of how you get this done. But the idea is to pay attention to the input from your internal customers as you plan and improve your function. The efficiency side tends to be a little bit more quantitative. And a good one is the value to budget ratio. In other words, we have a budget of X million dollars, and we provide 10X that in value in terms of protection of the profit and loss statement from the issues that could hurt the P&L. So, think about it as the qualitative, the one quote there at the bottom. I remember one executive saying, look, everyone says here, I tell stories about they went to the Hill and they did this lobbying effort and they made all these contacts, and that's all supporting activity. I don't understand the results. And then I just get a lot of stories about this is a great story of what we did for you. But I have no evidence that this happens all the time. These seem to be almost random areas of success. So I don't have confidence that I want to increase the budget for this area because I'm not sure that it's actually going to be used well. I have other areas of the business that I trust more that are going to use the money usefully, and I'm going to allocate more budget to them. And so this is really where the ability to describe your value proposition and demonstrate it with the mixture of quantitative and qualitative results is going to help you increase your budget. So now let's talk about issue management. This is a pillar of the Radical Influence Network. It is a discipline that has started in, I think, the 1960s. With Howard Chase wrote a book on this topic and kind of created the field. And it's kept alive by the Issue Management Council. And I even have a blog on this topic on the Radical Influence Network website. But there is kind of a spectrum of issues. Some are just tactical business issues of a new regulation that's going to increase your cost, or a new tax or something like that. And as well, or much higher level policy positions, down at the bottom there on the left, that are a little bit more amorphous, that can be much more strategic and longer term in impact. And they touch on things like your reputation and your success at advocacy and so forth. But the thing is that these issues, the identification of issues, it really is now becoming a way to use it as a unit of work, to measure work, and either issues are successful or they're not, and issues create more value than others or they don't. All issues can roughly be quantified, as we're going to see shortly, and they become a unit of work. It's just like a legal shop says, here's our portfolio of cases. There's some big ones and some little ones and some hard ones and some easies, but this is what our landscape looks like. Or the head of R&D who says, look, this is what my plate looks like for my shop here. We've got 15 new products, and 3 of them are totally new technologies, and 5 of them are just minor adjustments to the existing. So it's a way to describe the portfolio that area is managing. Similarly, in IT, it's usually about, hey, we run the computers and the Wi-Fi system, but we also have these projects to introduce new software, to maintain the software. And the IT area really is driven largely by projects in that way. So issues can be a project, they could be a long-term program, they could be a bill to go kill, they could be a regulation that you want to advocate for to pass. But being able to describe what your influence function does in terms of what portfolio of issues are you managing, and what's the nature of that portfolio? Are they all real? Do you just have 3 really big issues, or do you have a mishmash? What is the mix look like? This is important to be able to communicate to others what you're facing, and how you're trying to support them, and what also their needs are fitting into what you also have to deliver. So let's take a look at big quote at the top. So I've heard many CEOs say, so how does that issue affect, actually the way they usually say it is my business. How does that issue affect my business? And it really comes down to a focus on the center here. And so, we have a simplified income statement. Revenue less cost, is profit. That's your income statement. And so all issues will be of one type or another. On the left, you have opportunities where it's an opportunity to increase revenue. Look at each of the 4 arrows. The opportunity is to increase revenue. If that happens, the profit goes up. That's a good thing. Somebody's happy. Below that is an opportunity to reduce cost. If you do that, profit goes up. CEO is happy. And on the right side, if you have a risk to the business, that revenue is going to go down. You're not happy because your profit goes down. And if you have your costs going up, that's the lower arrow, the arrow in the lower right, your profit is going to go down. So your CEO is sad. So all issues can be typecast as to one of these 4 types. And now there may be a very complex bill or whatever that may have a mixture of impact. And the way to deal with that is simply just break it apart as to what is the part that helps revenue go up, and what part which is an opportunity, and what is the part that makes costs go up, which is actually a risk. So you can break apart issues to do that, and then you can look at the ultimate impact. So let's just take an example here. Here's some legislative and regulatory examples to bring this to life. Upper left, and the opportunity on the revenue side would be to try to pass new legislation that opens up a new market. And this means new geography, new segment for existing products. and therefore this is going to increase revenue. On the upper right, related to revenue, you you want to defeat you're facing a proposed law and you want to defeat it because it would restrict the size of the market due to a proposed tariff or some eligibility restriction, which would reduce your overall revenue, okay? And on the lower left, you have an opportunity for eliminating a compliance cost. So you want to get some legislation passed to do that, maybe related to labeling or paperwork submission or something like that. You have an opportunity to reduce costs, and that is, that type of opportunity, that type of issue. Lower right, defeat a regulation, proposed regulation that requires a higher threshold of compliance that really drives costly alterations to your operations. So it's a new expense item that would be added to the income statement, and profit goes down, so it is a risk. So you can see these are the four types and how each can be that they can be done. So if you take those four categories, they can actually be given a name in the center of this picture. That the upper left for an opportunity for revenue is revenue generated, and upper right where you have a risk against the reduction of revenue, you're protecting revenue. So it's revenue protected, and lower left cost saved, or lower right cost avoided. Now, generally, if you look at much of the work of the people who do this, the companies that do this, the best practice companies they rank every legislative and regulatory action they take, issue they take, and they do exactly what we're going to be describing in the next couple pages. And they actually start to quantify each issues. So it's very common for the influence functions, looking vertically, if you will, to think about the left side being opportunity, the right side being risk. That's very natural. It's good for the company or bad for the company. That's a good way to cut it. In reality, the business and finance organization tend to view everything in the world of, well, what affects revenue and what affects cost, because I know that will determine what the profit impact is. So their interest is clearly on revenue versus cost, and wanting to have quantified profit impact, is something that they really like to see. Now, the influence function obviously faces an uncertain world in a political environment or a regulatory environment. You can't control exactly what regulators are going to do, or a social environment. And so there's an amount of uncertainty, and that makes the influence functions a little nervous about putting numbers on anything, right? Because they feel like they might be held to them, or they get a lot of scrutiny, and it's not comfortable. So just want to point out at this stage that one of the best ways to deal with this is a natural tension, is to develop estimates of a range of impact. So you can do a low and a high and say, this issue could have this low level of impact, or it could have this high one. And now the argument is not about, are you going to put numbers down, but let's talk about what's a fair assumption to use for making those numbers. That's how you cross over into the world of providing quantitative information in a world that is unpredictable, right? Which is really reality. So if you go do that, this is an example of a quantified issues list. There are made up issues, multiple industries represented here. So this is not a single company, but you can see that the top half of this list are issues that affect revenue, and the bottom half are issues that affect cost. And the right side, right two columns, codify each issue as having either an opportunity or risk, or a cost or revenue. So you now are, with those two columns, you are now placing this issue into one of the four quadrants we just talked about. And then, moving to the left, the impact low and the impact high are ways to estimate what that impact would be. So this is a great way to convey, this is the portfolio of issues that I'm going to be managing and working for this business unit or for this corporation. Here's the big ones, here's the little ones, and just to put some size on it. This doesn't have to be done for every single issue. This example, if you're a large company, $100 billion in revenue or $50 billion in revenue, you're going to have a much more structured approach, and you're going to need this, particularly if you operate in a number of states, to be able to track where you are. So this red circle on this thing is really just an illustration for how does this, the next page will show just how that number 20 for an issue related to that the current requirement for labeling and reporting is expanded. So you have to do more labeling and reporting. How does that affect the business? And let's go look at it. So you always start with a baseline. And so you look at, well, so how much do we spend this year or last year did we spend on labeling and reporting? So let's just say it was, these numbers are all made up. So it's $400 million or $400, doesn't matter. But there's a baseline cost for what that issue could affect, that number 400 being something different in the future if the issue is not one, okay? And so you now have your baseline, that's number one at the top. And the second step is to say, so how much, if we had to do more labeling reporting, how much more are we likely to need to spend to meet the requirements, okay? And so it could be that it's really just a finger in the air that says, hey, it's got to be around 5%. It's certainly not 50%. Let's put some low numbers on this, and then we'll go refine this later. But let's just find out where this sits in the mix of all the issues we're addressing. Okay, so if you take the 400 baseline cost and you have a 5% increase, that's $20. And now you have next year's estimated cost. Because your cost goes up, your profit will go down by the same amount. So you need to bring it down to the profit view, but you can now see exactly how you calculate. Every one of these numbers on this page goes through essentially a type of calculation, which is a baseline number of existing cost or existing revenue times an incremental change. And then if you're going to do for revenue, you include an impact of gross margin. What is the profit? And that gets you to the profit and loss impact. So another example, there was an article in the Washington Post a couple of years ago, and it was a longer article for 5-6 pages, and it talked about a number of challenges the company was facing, and it was about, is Amazon going to succeed even more, or it has challenges, or what was kind of the tone of the article. But out of that article were 4 explicit examples that exactly fit this way of thinking about it for each of the 4 types of issues. So I'll just start on the top, on the left, that today, Amazon, or at that time, Amazon gave a discount to federal employees. And there was a proposal to expand that discount to 7 additional states. So if you did that, you could then estimate, well, how much do we sell, in those states, and what do we think we would gain in terms of increased revenue? And the estimate at the time was $500 million. And so you say, well, if we have a 10% profit margin, which is not exactly right here, but just made up numbers, you can multiply the 2, and you now say that's a $50 million issue. And on the upper right, so there was Amazon had a contract for the federal Amazon Web Services and someone was protesting the contract. So the notion was, well, Amazon could take out an ad in the Washington Post and explain how they were concerned that people might say, oh, this contract is under protest. We should, people might stop using Amazon Web Service and our revenue goes down. So that was the risk to the business. And so the solution was putting an ad in the Washington Post to say, hey, look, we went through these 18 competitive steps. This is a fair competition, and what the protest is really driven by sour grapes, not by us doing anything wrong, and putting more facts and information to support that point of view. And if that campaign was successful, you would save the profit on the amount of sales, that $2.8 billion of sales you already have to the federal Amazon Web Service, and you're now protecting that revenue. In the lower left, today the Amazon uses the U.S. Postal Service to deliver some packages for the last mile of delivery, and that is a logistics benefit to Amazon because they can just kind of turn over packages to the U.S. Postal Service, and they don't have to pay for the trucks and the drivers to go out to remote areas. And so someone had the idea of, well, why don't we also do this in Canada for Canada Post? And so this might invoke some advocacy work, and hence was put on could be put on a list for issues as an example. And so what would the benefit be? Well, the Canada sales last year was 17 billion. And if we were able to, turn this over to Canada Post, we could reduce our logistics cost by 15%, multiply the two numbers, and you could save a ton of money. Okay. The lower right was related to someone was saying, oh, well, the deal with the U.S. Postal Service was too good for Amazon, and we should just raise the price of $1 per package, and that this would be a good thing for the U.S. Postal consumer because that's more fair in theory. And so, what is the risk to Amazon of that having to pay $1 more per package to the Postal Service for its services of delivering for the last mile? Well, it would be $1.8 billion, according to this. So you can see just by looking at these examples, the lower left idea of saving costs with Canada Post is so much more valuable to the business than anything else. And the least valuable one is expanding that federal discount to employees in the upper left because it's only $50 million. So it's 50 versus 2.5 billion as an example, made up numbers, obviously, but you can see that you can now also identify themes. So sometimes a government affairs department might say, look, we work for a federal contractor. So a lot of our government affairs work is really about generating revenue and getting contracts. So we are driven off that upper left-hand quadrant of how we add value. And another might be, well, we're a producer and have 15 plants around the country. And, we have some nasty chemicals we use, and we're concerned about further restrictions on what we use in our products or how we run our factories. So our focus is really on how we add value in this company is through cost avoidance. And so as an outside consultant, when I go into one of these functions, I'm already thinking which quadrant are the dominant ones for this business unit. And frankly, if the people running that function cannot describe it in that way fairly quickly, it raises questions about how well that function is being managed. and whether or not it should deserve additional funding or not is a fair question. So if you go through that exercise, this is a screenshot from a financial impact scoring tool called FIST that looks at, does this process, that spreadsheet you saw before, gets rolled up onto this summary page. And you can now say, we have 13 issues in the upper left-hand quadrant add up to, here it's $218 million, or 7 issues on the upper right add up to potential revenue protected. And now, how do you get to a single number? Well, you really take the midpoint between the low and the high. And you now are showing, impact in a way so that this example is heavy on cost. This, it just turns out these numbers are this way, but you can see the numbers are bigger for cost avoided and then for cost saved. So there's a lot of going on in terms of the cost structure of this company that had multiple divisions and so forth. And then, so if you say, look, this is what we're doing for the bottom line, all of these things are written in dollars of profit. So you can actually add them together. And the grand total here for this company, which is quite large, is over $5 billion. But it is not surprising to have a company that, spends, I'll just say, less than $10 million on a function and be able to say they add 5, 10, or even far more that in value when you look at the profit and loss impact. So this gives a sense of relative size and confidence in executives that things are being managed for value. So what happens when you go through this exercise and you're looking at a single issue and it turns out that the profit impact of an issue or the whole slate of issues is basically zero or it's negligible, right? So what do you do when the profit impact is showing up as zero? Well, I would say you need to look longer term. And the way to do that is to look at the business strategy. That's why we covered that in the very first step of defining the needs of the business, is understanding the business strategy. So looking at the list of main value drivers at the bottom, the risks and opportunities, the first 2 bullets largely drive the left-hand box at the top of the problem. Let's just say that is not so critical. The bottom 3 are more relevant to business strategy, and you could lose your license to operate or your freedom to operate. You could have a reduction in your reputation that hurts revenues, or it makes it very costly to grow because it's so much harder to get new customers. You have to spend more on marketing to them. Or anything that is going to accelerate or improve the value of your new business strategies and objectives. That's all business value. So when the specific issues aren't showing the story, you also need to, and I would say, and always also ask, well, how are we impacting strategy? And through the year, is this influence function acting on strategy or off strategy? Are we always supporting the business strategy and pushing initiatives that are going to, accelerate benefits, or are we just neutral and doing our thing in the marketplace? This is a critical way of evaluating an influence function. So now, just going back to our 5-step management model, you can see that value is in every step. So in the determining needs, learning the needs, you have to understand how value is created and you have to understand the strategy. In defining the work, you need to prioritize the work on value. So you can spend more time and effort on the things that are going to create more value and spend less time and effort on things that are going to create the less value, the low value items. When you apply the resources, you're monitoring it for value, and then you're reporting on it when you measure results, and then you're also trying to drive more. So moving on to out of measurement to management is really just thinking about it as throughout the year, as opposed to episodically or one time a year. So why is measurement so hard? There's a lot here. I don't want to go through everyone. It would take a bit long, but I just want to point out a few. And, at times, and we're going to get to this, that, sometimes risk is just so extreme that just simply having the capacity to respond actually takes on new value. And a lot of companies have discovered that through COVID, that when the supply chain was messed up and they needed to have a government response or support, the fact that they were active allowed that to materialize. There's a whole bunch of issues related to what really caused that regulation to get passed or get adopted or not. Causality is the number three. Hard to determine at times. Also, attribution is that if the trade association was involved, as well as the company, who really put that over the top to get enough votes for the legislation to pass. That's a question, and sometimes you'll never know. But so there's always this concern about measurement being asked to be perfect in a world that is imperfect and unpredictable. And I think the expectation that measurement value is perfect is not a real one. And that's why using ranges helps manage that expectation quite well. There's a similar list here, if I can get the page to advance. I don't know why my let me escape out here. There we go. How do you make measurement easier? One is focus not only on how to win an issue, but how much winning an issue is going to help business results. And that's where the profit and loss impact really becomes very relevant. Using multiple approaches, we talked about qualitative and quantitative. Number 5, using an annual value report that has quantified examples and measures. So it's not just only a narrative about how hard you work, but also that it has a big impact on the profit and loss of the business and the ability to achieve its business strategy are all very relevant to conveying that. If you're going to throw around a lot of numbers, partner with finance so that they will endorse them. Finance is used to making estimates, and that will be okay, and they will just want to talk about the relevance and appropriateness of the assumptions. And that's not a bad thing, that's just trying to understand, right? And don't try to seek perfection. This is where direction wins over precision in terms of communicating about value. And I'd like to add one more aspect here, and that is the firehouse analogy. Much like a firehouse, just having the ability to respond is a very important driver of value. So let's just talk about the left-hand side of this page first. Firefighting work can have two types of activity. One is just, they sleep there, the firefighters sleep there, they cook there, they clean the trucks, they're always ready to go, they train, and, sometimes they're not out on a lot of calls. But when they are called, it's pretty effective because they can respond with working equipment, respond quickly because they're sleeping there. And that is a system built for effectiveness. It is not built for efficiency. Okay. And then on top of that, so that's your core staffing. That's the bar chart in the middle. That's your core staffing, is to simply have the response capability a firehouse needs to have. Now, then there's other variable work that goes on top of it. It could be that you have multiple emergencies and you need to support the county next door. You have special events like parades or seasonal risks like fire, wildfires or whatever. And now you're into variable staffing that is not, for the entire year and so forth. And so when you're doing that, you're obviously doing it somewhat for effectiveness, but you're making sure you're doing it efficiently by not hiring everyone to do those things all year round, because they would be sitting around even more. So the efficiency, variable staffing is usually more for an efficiency play, and your core staffing is more for an effectiveness play. So for an influence function, the always ready response capability means to maintain relationships, and those are important. And maybe they aren't going to have a big issue this year on that. It doesn't mean you ignore that key trade association or sit on that committee or participate in that NGO or whatever it might be. You need to do certain things to maintain relationships. And then for the areas that you're going to be working on the high value issues, like we talked about earlier, some of those are going to vary over time. There might be, a minimum number of issues you always have, and that could justify some additional core staff. But then you also want to use consultants, outside resources, and so forth to meet the needs of peak workload, because your number of issues went up for 6 months or for a year or two or whatever. But are you managing it, in that way that you're addressing both effectiveness and efficiency? So that brings me to the final conclusion, which is that there are actually 3 drivers of business value. And the first one is the profit impact of issues, the profit and loss impact of issues. That's what we were really talking about during the value section. The business impact on the business strategy impact that either can accelerate or slow down or hinder a business activity in the market, a business strategy. Those are absolutely relevant. And then the ability to maintain contacts and learn about key issues, build relationships that will have future value when issues are expected to arise. Those all have value. So if you manage your function and run your influence function with these 3 levers being addressed, you're going to have a much better opportunity to have radical influence in the market, and your internal customers saying, yes, they always pay attention to how much value they're creating, and they always try to focus on creating the most value. That is one of the highest compliments you can get from an internal customer. So lastly, what are the benefits of this focusing on the value impact? Well, it'll help maintain confidence of the C-suite. It'll justify the funding from the business. Some corporations don't have a corporate budget for government and public affairs. They make the business units pay for it, and hence there's a regular discussion about what did you do for me, and is it worth what I paid you for that influence function. If you're more in corporate social responsibility or sustainability, I can see where the purpose of the staff function is more to push new ideas and push compliance on the organization, and the budget may not be, it'll be a little bit less of a service to the business units and a little bit more of a service to the corporation as a whole, to have all of the business units moving along and adopting a practice that they want to have adopted, like more sustainability and so forth. It'll also, it's a natural way to drive continuous improvement, because you'll always be looking at how do we create more value, and that just is a natural step. And you can always get on people's calendars to talk about how you create value for their business. Also, CEOs don't last forever, and they change rapidly in a surprising way sometimes. And a new one will come in and say, so what are you doing in this area, and how is it valuable to my business, the business I now run? and so everything is under scrutiny. And taking this approach will allow you to stand tall when those questions come. And you know then that you're reflecting priorities in how you do the work, and therefore creating the most value for the business. So it helps in many ways all around. Value is focusing on value is a good thing. So I'd like to just see if anyone has any questions at this point. I'll look at the chat window here and let people, I want to just ask folks to, if you've found any interest in this webinar, share this with your colleagues. This is not proprietary content. We want more folks to join the network, and the more people who get exposed to this thinking and contributing and making their comments known, the network will get better, and that'll be better for everyone. So let me just turn to a couple of questions that I see here coming in by chat. The first one is, do you see the pillars of radical influence as being permanent? And these are the value management and issue management and business partnership alignment and situational awareness. This was way back on earlier slide. I would say probably not permanent, but not going to change every day either. Issue management is, a good 20 plus year history. And excuse me, let me get a sip of water here. The value management, I think, has been there, but is now becoming more and more specific and a thing. Business partnership has been around for finance and HR and procurement, and I think is applicable to many other functions. So I see that also becoming more of a topic. Transformation is an old one. So some of these are not brand new things. They are proven areas that need further adoption and attention. They are areas that are being imported and transferred, if you will, and copied from other functions that have done it well, particularly larger functions. Finance is usually your largest corporate function if you're thinking of staff functions. The areas of AI for situational awareness, just a comment there, information is exploding and is going to continue doing that. So this is kind of an area that AI is a natural fix for. Someday it will not be a pillar because everyone will have adopted it. So I think these pillars have a life. They guide the next point of evolution, and then they live their life and they get absorbed into the everyday working of things, and they're gonna fade away. So I see it as a longer term, a rolling portfolio of levers to improve performance, and it doesn't have to be limited to 6. But that's also going to be done with input from the network. So that's kind of how I'm looking at that at this point. Let's see here. There's one other question here about what is the next webinar, and will it address any of one of the 6 pillars? My answer to that is don't know, but we'll know very soon. It's likely to be either around the situational awareness and artificial intelligence pillar, or possibly around issue management or business partnership. And so we're not going to go right back to value right away, for sure. And then we're also thinking about whether certain topics fall into a webinar or a podcast are better presented that way. So we're thinking about that, but we'll let you know soon. And let me just see if there's any other questions. I'm seeing some repeats. So I think we're pretty much at time here. So I think we'll leave it at that. And want to thank everyone for attending the first session here. And please drop a note to me if you have thoughts and questions. And please share this with your colleagues so we can build the network as we go forward. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.